Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 release Immaculate, and when this was released in theaters, I saw a bunch of people posting saying, "Oh, I loved it, it was so great," and people just running there because it was pretty highly anticipated. As with most of my films, or pretty much all my films lately, I opted for the at-home option. So I went ahead and rented it through Fandango at home, and the rental was only $10.59 after tax, so way more economical than going to the theater. But I do understand the appeal of seeing it in the theater. I definitely do. It just definitely was not one of those films where I felt like I need to see it in the theater. Plus, if I am going to see films, typically I like to just do it at my local drive-in because that's way more fun. But that's just me. Anyway, let's talk about Immaculate. Directed by Michael Mohan, who did One Too Many Mornings, Save the Date, The Voyeurs, and Everything Sucks. Everything Sucks was a TV show that they did, I think like 7 episodes of, something like that. This was written by Andrew Lobel. This was the individual's first feature film they have written. There are subtitles for some portions of this film, so just know that. It takes place in Italy, so they do have Italian actually being spoken with English subtitles. So if you're someone who totally hates subtitles, just know that. But the majority of the film is not subtitles. It is maybe more than you would think for an mostly English language film, but it's not too much. So you can make it. You can make it through it. And I do think this film was pretty good. I did like it. I didn't like it as much as the hype I've heard around it, but I did like it. I thought it was pretty good. Oh, real quick, also, Sydney Sweeney is in this. I know there's been a lot of hubbub about Sydney Sweeney in the news and on social media. I've only seen her prior to this film in White Lotus, which, I mean, she did quite a good job in White Lotus, and she did quite a good job in this, so I'm not like a Sydney Sweeney fan. I would need to see more from her. I know she's been in some other stuff, so maybe I will see more from her at some point. Quick synopsis. It's about a woman who's played by Sydney Sweeney, a young woman, who decides to join a convent in Italy. And she goes there, and once she gets there, things happen. Now, the title of the film is a strong hint at some of the stuff going on in the film, or a main thing going on in the film, which is why I think maybe the title should have been a little bit different. But that said, you don't know exactly how that's going to play in. You don't know exactly how things are going to play out. So synopsis-wise, that's all I'm going to give you. I will give you a thematic thing at the very end, but I'll warn you before that if you don't want to know anything about the very strong, very beat-you-over-the-head theme with this film. Whether you like that or hate that. I know people are kind of split on how they view those things. But, I will warn you so you can stop watching if you view that as a spoiler. All right. The opening scene of this film does pique your curiosity about the film and where they're trying to go with the story. That's something that a lot of films, especially like lower budget independent films, have been trying to do in the horror realm for some years now, where they like to have like one scene before the title card where they're like, it's something kind of wild or something kind of cryptic or something, you know, terrifying that happens, and then they kind of back things up and slow the story down as a way to kind of hook you real quick and make you wonder, okay, we're going to get to something like this at some point, I assume, and what's this all about? Guess I better, you know, pay attention and find out. So I do think it's a good attention getter, and I think they did a good job with it in this instance. There is something a character speaks about early on in the film in a way that very strongly signals that it's going to be important to the story in one way or another. Obviously, you don't know in what way or what's going on with what they're talking about, but they signal it so much that I think it was a little too overt with things like that, because people are very... I wouldn't say very, but a little more savvy with film and how film is written and executed nowadays, especially because of social media and because of film culture. I think it would have been better if they kind of would have dialed that back a little bit, made it a little bit more of a surprise when it comes up much later in the film. But I will also say that enough transpires with the film so that by the end, when things do come up, you may have already forgotten about that. I had slightly. So yeah. The way the convent is shot not only makes it visually interesting, but also helps create a slightly unsettling atmosphere. So, wonderful job on the way this looks. The cinematography is very good with the film. There's also, this is a note I have later, but I'm just going to cover it now because it kind of clumps better with this right here. There's a really interesting use of the architecture in this film to frame things within the shots. Sometimes to frame entire shots, but also to frame something they're trying to focus on within a bigger shot. I found that very interesting. I find that very cool artistically when a filmmaker will do that. So I have to give kudos to the director for looking for those more interesting visual things to be able to do. Plus, I don't know why, but like interesting architecture in films really gets me. It really pulls me in. It really gives me something extra to look at within the film from a visual standpoint. So I really enjoy that. And their shooting location was very interesting to look at. So that definitely helps with it. They do a good job of making the viewer feel out of place while the main, just like the main character. This character is an American individual who is going to Italy. She does not really know the language. She knows the very slightest amount of Italian. And so she's in all these instances, you know, being talked around with people who are talking in Italian, and she's just like, wait, what are you talking about? I don't know. Culturally, she doesn't know everything that's going on. She's obviously not been to a convent before, so she doesn't know kind of, you know, what's really going on and what to expect and what she should be doing or shouldn't be doing. So you as a viewer are following her and coming in very new to this as well. And I think they do such a good job of showing things from her perspective that you as a viewer feel out of place. You feel uncomfortable. You feel like if I were in this position, I also would feel very uncomfortable not knowing what's going on and just feeling super naive, which is the main thing about the character. There are a few kind of effective jump scares in this. Not too many, and I'm glad about that because I feel like there are films that will tend to try and go too hard on the jump scares and then they just don't work. They're just not interesting at all. So the jump scares they had, the very few, I thought they actually were somewhat effective. And I appreciate that. That's fine. There's some music that's used in this that sounds a lot like old 70s Italian film music, which I personally very much appreciate. Giallo films being one of my favorite subgenres of horror. The music sounded very similar to a lot of stuff that I've heard in Giallo films, so I love that kind of nod to that old 70s Italian film. It was pretty great. I mean, I literally could hear some of this or picture some of this music playing with some of these Giallo films that I've seen and loved. So I love that aspect of it. And it just, for people like me, it places this film kind of like firmly in Italy for that reason. And it also makes it feel like the 70s. I don't think it was the 70s in this film, but it makes it feel like it. Some of the acting feels a bit overly dramatic, unfortunately. For the most part, the acting is good. Now, I don't know if this was a situation where the director was trying to get it to like pull more out of them, and it kind of went a little too far into being overly melodramatic. For one character in particular, it's the guy who plays the main priest that they focus on in the film. I mean, he's a good actor, but it just goes too far with the character, in my opinion. But once again, I don't know if it was his personal choice or if it was the director saying, I want more, I want more. It's really hard to know in those instances, or it could have been a collaborative effort. I really think that in that instance, less is more. It seemed to make the character more of kind of like a parody as opposed to actually feeling like a real character. I already talked about the architectural aspect. Character reactions to intense things are often very dialed down, which actually does not work with this film. This film is trying to portray like real life. Like this is going on in real life. You should be able to picture this happening in your life. When it comes to some of these reactions, like there was something being done to a person that's really very messed up, and their reaction to it was not nearly strong enough. There was another instance of the same thing, something really horrible being done to someone, and they barely react at all, which makes absolutely no sense. And it's those moments that start to take you out of the film from time to time. I mean, you do get settled back into it, but it's never good to have those kinds of speed bumps when you're watching a film. So I really think those were instances where the director needed to say, hey, we need a lot more out of this performance. Again, I don't know if this was an instance where it was the actor's decision, the director's decision, or a collaboration between the two. I feel like typically it's a collaboration between the two, but you just needed more in those instances. Less melodrama, more strong, horrific reactions to horrific things. And that also speaks to, there are some pretty good gory sequences within the film that I know you true gore hounds are going to appreciate. There is some CGI in this. It's not great. I will tell you up front, it has to do with fire. When fire is done in CGI, it looks bad. It is one of the worst looking CGI things that you can do because the physics of how fire actually moves is not capturable with CGI, at least that I've seen pretty much. And especially when you're showing it close up like it does in this film, it just looks bad. But on the other hand, I don't want them using actual fire if it's dangerous. So I'm okay with it. I'm throwing it out there that it doesn't look great. You also can have scenes that don't have fire at all. You don't necessarily need it. You can come up with other ways to do things. And they didn't really need it in this film. The ending is pretty solid, and I'm glad that they had the guts to take it as far as they did with the very final scene. I was wondering, I was like, are they going to chicken out on this very final scene? Because I see where it could go, but are they going to pull a twist and chicken out and not go all the way? But they did it. This is not a half measure. They went all the way with it. And I applaud them big time for that. And that's one of the reasons it's getting a bump up, because I was between two scores. So this is a perfect time for me to tell you, out of 5 stars, half stars in play, I'm going to give it a very solid 3.5 star rating. I was between 3 and 3.5, but the way they kind of stuck that ending and had the guts to go there, I was like, all right, I'm giving you a 3.5. That does it. So pretty good film. I do recommend it. I think it's worth checking out, especially for a little under $11 for rental through Fandango at home. I mean, and by the way, like, I'm not sponsored by Fandango. I have no ties to them or anything. It's just, that's where I go. So I'm just telling you what I do. Anyway, I am going to talk about the thematic thing, but before I do that, I want to say, help me out by subscribing to my channel. I do appreciate that. Hit the thumbs up for this video or any video if you want to help encourage me and also help me with the YouTube algorithm. And you can hit the notification bell button to know when I'm putting up new videos, which, you know, if you watch them early, it helps with traction, but do what you want, you know. Big thing is just subscribe to let me know that you appreciate what I'm doing. But anyway, now I'm going to go on to the thematic stuff. So if anyone wants to, you know, stop the video, go ahead and do it. So thematically, this is clearly a metaphor for the loss of a woman's right to choose in society and the helplessness that women experiencing therein. Now, obviously, this is a very extreme situation that they depict here because it's horror. Like, that's what you do. You take the ills of society, reflect them back, but you exaggerate them to hyperbolic levels, basically. And I think that's basically what this film does. Usually I'm kind of like, stop beating us over the head so hard with these types of things being so ridiculously overt. I usually like subtext a little bit more, mainly because it's a little more fun for me to kind of like try and pick the film apart and figure out what they're trying to say, kind of like an Ari Aster film. But I think it actually works relatively well with this. And I think part of the reason is it is something that is experienced so intensely, and it is something that's pretty terrible. The ordeal that people go to or have to go through, women have to go through in this instance, that I think it warrants it being more overt. So I'm okay with that. But I can also see where other people really wouldn't like that level of it. I'm not going to go into, you know, a woman's right to choose, like, political debate or anything. I understand there are people who feel a lot of different ways. I have my very strong opinions on it, but that's not really what this channel is about. Everyone is accepted here, no matter what your political view is, unless you're a terrible person like a Nazi or anything like that, like white supremacists, Nazis, racists, anti-Semites, like people like that. You're not welcome here. But other than that, if you just have like differing opinions on some stuff, I am always willing to talk, because I don't believe, I know I'm going a little too far down this road, but I don't believe in just labeling someone a terrible human being because of one political belief they have or because they think differently. I may disagree with you, and I think it's worth having a conversation in you know, my personal life, not through this channel, but I believe it's important to have a conversation and kind of see where common ground is, but also see different points of view. You know, let someone know my point of view, let me understand another person's point of view. And that is a big thing with my channel, if you haven't noticed. I'm always open to other points of view on films. You know, what I see in these movies is not, you know, gospel. Like, it's not 100% correct. It is what I experience as an individual, and that's why I'm always interested in what everyone else experiences as an individual watching these films, and why I always encourage people to comment and kind of give me differing opinions on stuff. There are a lot of people who have commented over the years and made me think differently about films. They really have, because I keep an open mind with that, and I just hope that everyone would keep an open mind. But I'm going to cut that off here. I'm kind of going a little too far on a little bit of a rant. But anyway, thank you everyone for checking this out, especially if you've made it this far. I really appreciate it. And until next time, keep it brutal.